Welcome back to Sci-Fi Book Trek. Today, Robert A. Heinlein's The Man Who Sold the Moon short story collection. Our spoiler talk.
First off, we start off with Lifeline, with Mr. Pinero having a debate at the Science Institute and telling all the other scientists they are idiots.
Fuck all y'all!
And that he's invented a way to determine when someone's life will end. Now he decides, I know, screw these guys, I'm going home. And sets up his own business, tells people when they're going to die. Now, the insurance company doesn't like this a lot. So they try to get him shut down by any means possible. And the scientists don't like it because he's sort of just embarrassed them. But he carries on telling people when they're going to die, including a lovely couple who goes, yeah, I can't tell you the machine's broke, so come back tomorrow, and then promptly watches out of his window as a carriage goes over him.
Oh yeah, she's pregnant as well.
Yes, which is a lovely scene. Then he goes home to have a nice big meal, a lovely expensive meal, and you're thinking, I wonder why this is.
That's called foreshadowing.
Then you find out there's a knock at the door, and a couple of rather sturdy gentlemen have been sent by the insurance agency to silence him. And so, Mr. Pinero dies.
Did he at least die painlessly? To shreds, you say? Well, how is his wife holding up? To shreds, you say?
And the scientists open a letter finding that he predicted his own death. So what they do is destroy all knowledge of it and smash up anything they can. The next story, Let There Be Light, which involves a scientist who is working in his lab late one night, and he gets a telegram to say, this other scientist is coming with important news, and he's going to come into his lab and tell him. And he decides, who cares? He goes down to a local bar, sees a lovely woman and tries to hit on her, fails, and goes, I'll go back to my lab then.
Pregnancy love. It's her, isn't it? It's not me, it's her.
After a short time, the woman comes up the elevator to his lab and says, I'm actually the scientist who telegrammed you. Who are you and why did you try to hit on me? I don't believe you're a real scientist. So after he proves his ID to her, they then go about discussing the possibility of making a light bulb which generates light but not heat.
I can't change the laws of physics.
Now, they managed to do this, but the father of the male scientist calls him in and says, I'm going to have to shut down the factory and the lab and stuff because, the government, they're just crippling me with these energy costs.
Fuck the government. Sit on my finger and swivel on my face.
So they use their technology already invented and create a solar device that absorbs light and puts out electricity.
Also makes a great beach bowl.
Big Power steps in and says, no, we own the energy market. We're not allowing you to do it. we'll buy your invention off you, and so we can store it safely in a warehouse and study it. Or, you might get kneecapped. And they decide, no, I tell you what, we've got a better idea. We tell everyone.
What do you mean, everyone?
Release it to all the papers around the world about this idea and tell them how to make it and everything, and we'll just collect royalties. And then the male scientist decides, I know, now we're free and safe and we can do anything we want. I'm going to marry you, the woman scientist, whether you say no or not. Now I'm dragging you to City Hall. And there it ends.
That's literally how it goes.
Right then.
The roads must roll.
Do you want to take this one?
I can take this one. So, America, thanks to an oil crisis, has had to do away with automobile transport. Private transport no longer exists. And instead of which, they've got massive moving sidewalks which stretch for hundreds and hundreds of miles. You can get from the very, very slow ones all the way up to ones moving at 100 miles an hour. Point is, these moving sidewalks have to be kept running. If they go offline for any sort of reason, the entire country could potentially grind to a halt. And that then brings us on to the trade unionists, who have somewhat recognised the fact that they own all the power in the country. And so they decide that they're going to stage a terrorist incident and shut down part of the roadway in order to encourage other parts of the roads across the United States to join them and to essentially force the government to give them all the rights and privileges that they want.
If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist.
And the chief engineer leads a raid, quite a daring raid, on the headquarters of the insurrectionists, and essentially stands up to the guy, who turns into a massive blubbering wreck, and basically that's about it.
Let's go! Come on! Come on!
So that brings us on to our next story. Blow-ups happen.
So, with the oil crisis still ongoing, the entirety of the United States is dependent on nuclear power. Now, it's not nuclear power as we would know it nowadays. This was based on Heinlein's understanding of the technology at the time.
Nuclear. It's pronounced nuclear.
Yes, it's what's now called a nuclear pile.
And as a result of the decisions from The Roads Must Roll, there's a great deal of psychological oversight that goes into the workers that manage this, essentially, bomb. And they keep finding that every so often these people will just go loopy.
I was thinking along the lines of no TV and no beer make home or something.
And they'll be pulled off the job. So they get in a professional to give his opinion on it, and he finds out that the fact that you've got psychiatrists watching these engineers' moves every step, every second of the day, is actually causing the stress that they are trying to avoid. And so
it's giving more stress.
It's giving them even more stress and causing them to fail out earlier. However, there's another problem. The nuclear pile is in fact a massive bomb that has the potential to wipe humanity off the map. And a single mistake, even, in the infinitesimals, a single mistake would
is
literally
inevitable, bound to happen.
Yes. And so, a determination made by the engineers at the plant that really and truly, they need to get this moved. They need to get it off planet. And so they take the plans that they have to the powers that be, and the powers that be then decide, well, we don't think that that's a really good idea. Maybe with another decade or two's worth of study, but we're lazy. We don't really want to. Or just it's going to take too much work.
And also, we've decided that you're fit for retirement. So, hi.
But the engineers have a backup plan in which that they are going to start spreading rumours about the dangers of the atomic pile, and that if it gets to an extent where the civilians decide that it's far too dangerous, then they'll be forced to shut it down. And if they don't go ahead with their plan, then they'll release this information to the public. And so the powers that be then decide, well, guess we're going to have to agree to you then.
But they managed to nullify the pile and then
launch it into orbit, where all of their problems would be solved.
And we then go on to the next story.
The man who sold the moon.
Yep. And at the start of that, we find out the nuclear pile did explode in space. There's a businessman at the centre of this. It starts with him. And he's called Dallas David Harriman. DD for short.
What does this button do?
And he decides that he's always wanted to go to the moon. So he's going to cash in all his assets to try and make a moon rocket. Even though they know they don't have fuel to get there.
They don't have the money to get there.
So he manages to talk two other people into joining them. And then he sets about on a grand scheme. First of all, he decides, I know, we'll get all the kids in America to donate money to us. And so once they've nickeled and dimed the children, they go on to other schemes like, what about if we get the spaceship to be sort of officially a post office, then we can send stamps up, register them on the moon and like cancel them, and then we could bring them back to Earth and sell them for millions.
To stamp collectors.
Yes. Yeah. And it goes on with his business ideas, because he decides, I know, before we even make a rocket, the moon travels over certain countries. So if we buy the rights to on every piece of land the moon travels over, then we own the moon. DD, on the other hand, he goes, right, I need more money. So, first of all, he goes to Coca-Cola, the drinks company. So after swindling that guy and swindling a few others, DD has set up a load of non-profit charities which sort of own the moon, but really his company owns the moon through them. But the charities are there, so when the rocket lands and comes back, America might try to claim the moon for themselves because it's an American private industry that does it, which would set the Russians off. So it would go to the UN, and if the UN's deciding it, these charities can come in and go, actually, we own it. We have rights, and the UN will go, oh yeah, that's fine, we'll give it to them, and problem solved. Just so he can screw America and the world out of the moon, essentially, and so he owns it. And one of the last schemes he does, because he finds out that the only way to get the rocket into orbit is to cut it down so there's only one pilot and no other passengers. So he goes, fine. He lets the pilot get there and goes, right, I'll go on the next one. With the mechanic as well, who's also bit cheesed off. But they finally send up the pilot with all this weight restrictions. They don't send the stamps because it would put it over weight restrictions. It wouldn't get out. DD hides the stamps, but instead gives the pilot, this is a small like packet. Hide it somewhere when you like take it with you and just hide it in the craft. He goes, okay, sure. And when questioned, tell the truth that I gave you these to hide. Don't question, just tell the truth. It's like, okay, sure. So, everything goes successfully. Gets to the moon. Comes back. Lands. And as soon as he's landing, DD lands by him. Quickly puts stamps in. Be like food dispenser and goes, oh yeah, your stamps have always been there. And then the press and everyone lands. And he goes over to greet them. And he goes, oh yes, go have a look in the cockpit. Go have a look, take photos. And soon a scuffle breaks out because the journalists have found a little bag with diamonds in it. And when questioning the pilot, he said that DD gave it him before they left. And so the press does what the press does and goes, all right, he must be lying. These must be diamonds from the moon. And so that puts up the people who want to invest in his company. And so he plans to go on the next mission. But then his other partners come in and say, no, you're too valuable to lose. So we're forbidding you go to the moon until it's a bright business success. So then it ends with DD accepting that he shan't go to the moon for a while, but he will make his lunar city. Right, and that takes us on to the last story in the book, Requiem, which involves DD Harriman as an old man. He finds this sort of circus attraction with an old rocket. He goes over to him and he sees the pilot and he says, look, I've got an idea. I want to go to the moon. If I can get you a good rocket, can you take me to the moon? So he starts scheming again, Harriman does. Sells all his assets, which causes his relatives, being his
heirs,
his niece and nephew, I think it was, to sue him to try and stop him and to declare him senile.
Because he's spending their inheritance.
Yes. Before the judge can make his deliberations, Harriman disappears. He goes to an American desert where he set up a little rocket with the pilot and his mechanic, and they're secretly making this rocket to go to the moon. So they spend a few days there testing it all, and then just as they're about to take off, a sheriff comes along and says, well, I've got to arrest you guys. So they knock him out, run for a rocket, jump on board and fire it. And they go straight to the moon. DD gets injured, breaks a few ribs, and
at his age,
he's not probably dying. He actually finally makes it to the moon. They set Harriman out of the rocket, sit him up on a rock so he can stare at the earth while on the moon, and there peacefully he dies. Right, so on to Loves and Hates. No, what do you love about it?
The technobabble aspect of blow-ups happen.
Yeah.
That's my fun bit. I enjoyed that all the way through.
That I could set up a frequency harmonic between the deflector and the shield grid using the warp field generator as a power flow anti-attenuator.
I do have a passing interest on how nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors work. I kind of got into a Wikipedia hole one day and just sat and just read. So it's interesting to see how much Heinlein actually did sort of get right.
Yeah. How much he knew at the time, considering.
Yeah, especially considering I would have thought it would have been quite protected information. The idea that Heinlein could sort of foresee certain aspects like solar panels. I mean, I did some reading and apparently there's been solar devices since 1839, but the modern solar panel sort of came into being around about the same time this book was being written. So the fact that he was able to sort of cotton that ahead of time, the ideas of like massive, well, transcontinental belt systems rather than highways, that's another thing that you just think, wow.
It is fascinating. I mean, especially coming from America, which is car heavy at that time and even more now.
And the idea of stuff like the tumblebugs as well, which feature in one story in this.
Mm.
And it's like, you didn't necessarily have to invent that, but you did. You know, it's stuff like that. It's that view of the future, that innovation, that creativity. That's the type of stuff that I love about science fiction, and I think I've said that before in a previous review.
The thing I got from like most of, especially the early ones, is the hope and the positivity.
Mm.
With the later one, the Man Who Sold the Moon, there was some sort of a sinister underline to some of it. Like, his house is just looks like a normal house, but there's an underground like nuclear bunker which is like 4 stories below us.
Oh yeah,
like, and that's just mentioned in passing.
Yep. And
like,
it's just
oh yeah, all houses are built like that. After a certain time, it's like, okay,
just a breadcrumb that you wouldn't necessarily actually pay attention to, but then it's like that's a deeper that's a deeper message of the State of the Union.
Yeah. Oh, we could have been wiped out at any time, so everyone has nuclear bomb bunkers. But
what about you? What was your particular love?
My particular loves, I think my favourite story is probably The Man Who Sold the Moon. It's just, I couldn't really get a bead on whether he was sympathetic in some areas or critical in some areas, because it felt like it flopped. Yeah. Sometimes within the same story, sometimes like throughout as a whole. Because it seems like he just wrote the story to write the story, like as it came to him, and like, oh, this would probably how it would play out.
Mm.
And that is devoid of what he thinks should happen or what he thinks is morally right or morally correct. It's like, no, this is probably what would happen.
Yeah, and
which is slightly different because I never feel like I got the author's voice so much. I got like some of like his ideas, but I couldn't tell you where he sat, like politically or on certain topics.
I don't know. I would have said throughout there's a bit of an anti-corporatist message, that there's almost like a belief that corporations own the country.
Yes.
And I think there's definitely certainly an anti-lobbyist bent to it.
There is that in places. However, there are other places where it's portrayed as, oh, well, it's just how it is, rather than the cynical aspect of going, no, this is wrong or this is incorrect, you know. Or even like, oh no, this is beneficial somehow.
Like I said to you in the non-spoilers, there's a theme of stagnation versus progression. And it was interesting to see that the progression was being done by the guy who was characterized as not altogether ethically sound, and yet all the scientists, the people that you would have expected, are the ones that are sort of holding back progress.
Yeah.
Or people that have got a vested interest in sort of what they believe, what they hold dear. I think that's really good for that message to have still come through. Even
Yeah, I mean, there's still like a lot of aspects that still ring true today.
Oh yeah.
I mean, especially in American society. But yeah, you know, problems are still there.
Yep. Don't drag people into marriage offices against their will.
There are things like that which are things that are sort of the sign of the times, I
Very
want
much
to say,
so.
but
not an excuse,
which are
but it is just a simple product of
not an
thinking.
excuse, but yeah, it's just he's working on other stuff rather than some of the social aspects which have changed.
Yeah. But it's simply the way things work. And to characterise it as anything else would have been disingenuous.
He's thinking of the bigger ideas and like the inventions that drive humanity, not social change.
Got anything that really stands out to you as a hate?
Some parts felt dragged out, like, oh, this must be there must be a reason for why it's dragged out, and you read it all in completion, and it's like, no, there's no reason. It was just like certain concepts which you would go over again and again and again. And some I understood, like some of the nuclear stuff, it's like, fair enough, it's a new idea. But reading from the standpoint of where we are now, it does feel dragged out in places. And how he's describing each like tiny bit, and it's just, yes, I understand it. You told me this a few pages ago, and I got it then. I don't need a more descriptive part now.
But I think that's just personal preference, because that's, like I said, the
but
bits
you
that I
like
like.
it, though, yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't know. I don't think there's anything I really hated. I mean, you could say The Man Who Sold the Moon ends a bit abruptly, but I'm kind of fine with that.
Yeah. I think it's designed to end like that. It's,
I mean,
you could keep him scheming for years and years.
In a way, it sort of has to end like that.
I mean, to be fair, I think you could have cut out quite a lot of the scheming for that part.
Maybe, but I did like some of the scheming.
Oh yeah, I'm not disputing that. It's
it's
just
like
adds to that
stealing lollipops
snowball.
from babies. It's just
it adds to that snowball. But then when it does finally pull the rug out on you, and it's like, well, this is the guy, despite the fact that he's a bastard, this is the guy that's actually made some inroads into progressing the human race. So you might not necessarily like him, but he's at least doing something as opposed to just sitting on the laurels.
But I mean, even before like you get to that aspect, he's an unlikable character. He's very unlikable, but the more schemes he does, the more like over-engineered and complicated schemes he does. It's just like I kind of give him begrudging respect, and I want to see what his next scheme is. But my God, he's not a nice character. No. He's not a nice person. But anyway, we'll go on to nitpicks.
Yes.
Right then, so have you got any nitpicks?
I was finding it a little bit difficult to nitpick it.
I mean, with it
Because-
being short stories, they are...
Well, not
Kinda
just being
hard.
short stories, but also the fact that even within the context of the technology that Heinlein's inventing within the stories, because it's hard science fiction, he's sticking to his guns and he's sticking to the concepts that he's setting up. I couldn't tell you whether there was like a point. The only thing that I would say is that, you know, you've got your Lifeline story right at the start with the machine that...
Yeah,
is
that
able-
seems to be the most fantastical.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the idea that no one else in the whole rest of the book actually is able to recreate that work.
Right. And yeah, like, 2 other nitpicks
Yeah.
are from the main story, The Man Who Sold the Moon. 1, the property rights of, like, you own the stuff above you as well. I think that's just an American thing.
I believe it is.
Some of these countries probably don't have that. Well, most of these countries probably don't have that law.
Mm.
You'd have to get them to put new laws on the statute so you can then buy the rights
I mean,
to them. Which might be doable, but
it might well be doable by
but
this
they're trying to
guy.
they're trying to do it in secret initially.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're persuading governments like around the world to put in a certain law about buying land, well, air rights above them.
Mm.
It seems a bit okay. What? One of the other nitpicks I had was one of the schemes he tries and pulls off. He goes to the like TV network and says, "Look, if you put a broadcast station on the moon, you can broadcast to everyone in America, and no restrictions. No one complaining about anything.
Mm.
Oh no, there's too much violence. Oh no, wait, that doesn't happen in America. Oh no, there's side boob on or something. You won't have that at all." Because you'll be broadcasting from the moon, and you can make lunar rights and
You
do
can
whatever you want.
essentially make it pirate radio, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like the moon goes behind the Earth, so you can only broadcast when the moon can see America, and America can see the moon, essentially.
I mean, the only thing that I can think of there would be you'd have to have relay satellites anyway.
But there's no satellites in.
Yeah,
so
I know,
that's what I
and
mean.
So yeah,
So, like,
you'd only
he sells
ever...
them on this idea, which is only can operate, let's say, half the time for, like, sense of doing the maths and like, oh well, technically, yeah, let's say half the time.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that seems like a bit of an oversight, admittedly.
Yeah.
Whether he's thinking that, you've got ground stations that are receiving and then can
pass it on, maybe, I don't know.
But then you would think that, okay, yeah, we can show as much. We could literally show hardcore pornography on the moon because we have no restrictions showing what we can show. But then when they get to the ground stations, it's like, well, the ground stations are still Earth. So we ain't going to pass any of this on.
Unless it's through sort of like a low band radio signal, which is bounced off the Earth's atmosphere, but you'd still have to get into the Earth's atmosphere first to like bounce around. But yeah, anyway, I think we'll end it there and we'll go on to final thoughts. Well, I think it had its ups and downs for its stories, and I wouldn't say it's got a strong voice, but it's very interesting.
I think in terms of short story collections, this has got better connecting tissue. Even with the first one being supposedly unconnected, I think this has got better connecting tissue than Asimov's I, Robot. because there's at least a sort of a background theme which is building towards in all of the stories, even if they don't quite seem connected.
The solar panels keep getting mentioned throughout.
Yeah, not just that. I'm talking about sort of the background themes of all of the stories sort of lead towards that concluding story. They've all built into that idea of stagnation versus progression. They've all built into that idea of anti-capitalist thinking, and then suddenly the capitalist is the one that almost saves the world, so to speak. But, you know, all of them contribute. Even Lifeline contributes to that idea. It even starts off.
I mean, that's how
that.
it initially starts off, sets it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do like it. I think sometimes some of the stories drag a bit, but overall, it's an enjoyable read. Or I still don't firmly know whether Heinlein is pro-capitalist business or anti-capitalist business.
I have
and
looked.
I think the answer is both.
I mean, doing some of the background research, apparently Asimov said that he was a flaming liberal.
Yeah, I like, from what I understand about Heinlein, he started off very much as a liberal. When he got older, he became a bit more conservative.
As many do.
Although he was still saying he was a bit liberal. But who knows? But yeah, like, it is a very good collection of stories, and they do gel together in a way. I don't think they all have meaning you can just easily extract. Like, oh, and the moral is. Like, none have that.
I don't think
they are.
I don't think there's supposed to be a moral. I think it's just an observation.
I understand. I'm just saying, he's he's those stories which are stories unto themselves, and more about exploring up the technology and the idea of the technology rather than humanity. Like, for the iRobot ones, I would say that explores humanity far more than these stories. I would say these more explore technology than humanity.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, we'll end it there. So, next week, and on the Heinlein note, this story was initially pitched as Starship Troopers meets Agatha Christie. It's a franchise book. That franchise is Doctor Who. 10 Little Aliens. So, join us next week for that. And a lovely review. And bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye. Welcome back to Sci-Fi Book Trek. Today we'll be dealing with Robert A. Heinlein's The Man Who Sold the Moon.
Short story collection.
Rhymes with front.
Once.